Section 26 of Music by Ursula Creighton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 26, Some Modern Composers. As music grows and develops, each composer shows in his work partly the influences of other composers whose music he has studied, and also his own individual way of writing and the special beauties he is able to express. In modern music, it is interesting to see how some composers are influenced by Bach, some by Liszt, others by Wagner, and so on. But this is only an interest of a special kind. For the ordinary listener, and indeed for every lover of music, the greatest interest lies in realizing what a work conveys apart from the way it is written, which is, as it were, only its dress. Some works convey nobility of feeling, some a lighter beauty, and each worthy composition gives us some beautiful feeling. In this way, we find which works give us special pleasure and which composers rouse our interest. There are so many modern composers whose work is of interest that it is only possible to mention a few of the outstanding names of each nationality, and among them must be mentioned a few who are not modern in the strict sense, but whose music belongs very much to the present day. France and Belgium. Not many years after the birth of the famous composers Schumann, Liszt, and Wagner, a French composer was born who also became famous, though his work has not had such a far-reaching effect as theirs had. This was Charles-François Gounod, 1818 to 1893. He had brilliant gifts which made him successful both as a student and later in life. As a student, he studied composition with the same master as Berlioz, and like Berlioz, he won a prize which took him for some years to Rome. When he returned to Paris, he was able to produce whatever works he wrote. His great success, the work which made him famous and which is still well known, is his opera Faust. He wrote this when he was 40, and he never afterwards wrote anything with the same power. Though he lived to be an old man, his music did not develop and does not seem to us at all modern in feeling. The music of Faust shows Gounod's individual gifts and power. Some of the scenes have beautiful music, some make an almost over-sweet sentimental effect. It is not a work that gives an impression of equal power throughout, but it has great beauties. The music is extraordinarily effective and is written by a master hand. Gounod was a very cultivated man. He studied the music of Schumann and Berlioz, finding it new and interesting. And he took a great interest in music for choirs, having been much influenced by the music of Palestrina he had heard while in Rome. It was this love of choral music that led to his writing a work which is well known in England, The Redemption. He lived for some years in England and started the Choral Society, which is now known as the Royal Choral Society. Contemporary with Gounod, but very different from him, was the Belgian composer César Franck, 1822 to 1890. As well as being a most learned and gifted musician, Franck was also a great teacher, and both as a teacher and composer has had a great effect on modern music. Quite indifferent to fame, content to live a quiet but laborious life, he existed, as it were, in a world apart, a world where criticism or lack of appreciation of his work never touched him, and where he was in constant communion with the beautiful sounds he produced. In that way, his was the life of a mystic, and mystic is much of the beauty that his works convey. He was absolutely free from jealousy and enthusiastically admired not only the great classical masters, but Berlioz and Wagner and many less well-known operatic writers. Though always poor, this never stopped his work. He taught for 10 hours a day to make money, and yet found time to compose constantly. For 32 years he was organist of Sainte-Clotilde in Paris, and pursued his quiet, regular life, inspiring his pupils and producing works which are full of beauty. One of the best known is his Symphony in D. His quintet and quartet for strings and his violin and piano sonata are also famous, as are his beautiful works for piano, Prelude, Aria, and Finale, and Prelude, Chorale, and Fugue. and his many works for organ and for voices. The best known of these last is Les Béatitudes. Unknown to the world at large, but the greatest musical genius of his day, his life was devoted to music, to writing it, and to making those with whom he came in contact understand more of the expanding power of expression in musical sound. When he died in 1890, his funeral was, like his life, quiet and unnoticed by any official ceremony. César Franck's lovely music, still the inspiration of later composers, is the work of a musician who was an absolute master of counterpoint. The themes he interweaves are so melodious that to some listeners who are inclined to think that tune is one thing and the combined tunes of counterpoint another, it is an added delight to realize the beauty of his tunes sounding with such clearness against each other, one as it were lifting the other, until the music soars. He wrote one opera, Hulda, which is full of lovely music. His works for organ are beautiful, and he left a great deal of music of many kinds, worthy of study and filled with beauties he alone could give. He was a very learned musician, but his learning was not confined to the works of the classical masters he loved. He was equally interested in modern works, and his own compositions are full of new and lovely effects. Another French musician whose name is well known is Charles Camille Saint-Saëns, born 1835. For some time he was organist at the Madeleine. For many years he was one of the most famous pianists of his day, and he was a very learned and extraordinarily gifted musician. His best-known composition is the opera Samson et Dalila, and as a composer of many instrumental works, he has shown his outstanding power to produce brilliant effect. A later French musician who now has a worldwide fame is Claude Debussy. Debussy did not expand the resources of musical sound, but he took a special kind of sound and made it peculiarly his own, and in that medium he has written some lovely music. His Après-midi d'un faune is beautiful music, and a perfect representation of the glowing feeling of the countryside on a warm summer day. His opera, Péléas et Mélisande, is sound-enhancing Maeterlinck's words with great effect. It is unlike any other opera, for it gives no effect of tune, but it is always harmonious and appealing. His quartet is lovely in a way all its own. It gives the impression of a flow of really lovely sound, unspoilt, as is so much music of the present day, by any forced feeling or straining for effect. It conveys a delicate and constant beauty. A French composer of genius whose work belongs to an earlier time, but whose name cannot be omitted, was Bizet, 1838 to 1875. His famous opera, Carmen, was produced the year he died, when he was only 37. He understood and used Wagner's method of writing opera with its leading themes, but the many beauties of his work are all his own. Carmen is a brilliant opera. The use of the orchestra is most expressive. The rhythms are vivid and beautiful, and the whole work has a vitality, clearness, and force that give it a unique position. It is performed everywhere and loved for the finished way the music is written and the vivid sense of life it conveys. Germany. The composers in Germany who have grown up since Brahms are in some ways too near to us for complete judgment of their works. The most famous of modern German composers is Richard Strauss. He is well known as a writer of symphonic poems and operas. The first opera that brought him fame was Salome. The music accentuates the horror of the story and is at times extraordinarily effective. His later operas, Elektra and Rosenkavalier, were written to very long, complicated poems, but they have straightforward melodies and moments of great vividness. His symphonic poems are in some ways his best works. In them, his power of climax and dramatic effect is most vivid, without being marred by the extraordinary complexity which marks some of his scores, where one part or theme is piled upon another without the consummate skill that enabled Wagner to make such complicated effects still clear and convincing. He has a great power of dramatic orchestral effect and great mastery of orchestral writing. Another German composer whose music has a completely different effect is Humperdinck, 1854 to 1921. His one successful opera, Hänsel und Gretel, is enchanting. The music is written in Wagner's manner, but sounds so simple and natural and melodious, so full of musical beauty, that the effect is entirely the outcome of Humperdinck's own individuality. One other work of his is well known, a fairy play with incidental music full of delicate charm, called Königskinder. Arnold Schoenberg is a modern German composer whose music still causes much discussion. It is so unusual, and in parts so dissonant in sound, that at a first hearing it is very difficult to judge. Some of it is undoubtedly moving, and it gives an impression of sincerity and conviction. Norway. A name well known among those of modern composers is Edvard Grieg. His is not music on a large scale, but it is the music of a cultivated writer with an individuality of delicacy and charm, and it has a national feeling like the simplicity of northern folk songs. Grieg's pianoforte concerto is a brilliant work. His violin sonatas are full of melody. His suites for orchestra to Ibsen's Peer Gynt are picturesque and individual, and perhaps best known are his songs and short pianoforte pieces, with a distinction of their own which has made them widely known. England. A very well-known name among those of English composers is that of Sir Arthur Sullivan, 1842 to 1900. His worldwide fame rests on his songs and the comic operas in which he collaborated with W.S. Gilbert. He was a composer with very great gifts. His genius for charming melodies and rhythms and the beautiful way he uses the orchestra make these works lovely music, and the pleasure as well as amusement that they give come from the beautifully finished writing and shape and the inspiration that underlies them. An English composer whose music has individual and great beauty is Sir Hubert Parry. His most famous compositions are for voices. They have a peculiar quality of sincerity and such power that they make a moving impression alike on educated and uneducated hearers. He has left many works which from the first note give a wonderful impression of dignity, beauty, and uplifted feeling. Another composer whose works for voices will always be enjoyed is Sir Charles Villiers Stanford. His choral ballad, The Revenge, and his Songs of the Sea are among the best known of his works, and they are loved everywhere. Of the several operas he wrote, Seamus O'Brien is the best known and the most interesting. Among contemporary English composers, the best known is undoubtedly Sir Edward Elgar. The composition which brought him fame was his setting of The Dream of Gerontius, but the works which show his greatest mastery and are his most purely musical productions are his Enigma variations, his violin concerto, and his orchestral works. These have great beauties and are vivid and original. A contemporary composer whose work has a feeling peculiarly English and is some of the finest of present-day music in England is Vaughan Williams. His work is melodious and rhythmic in a vivid way. The music he has written for chorus is dignified and moving, and his opera, Hugh the Drover, is a beautiful work that everyone can enjoy, both ordinary listeners and cultivated musicians. Another composer who has written some lovely music is Frederick Delius. English by birth, though his father belonged to a Dutch family, his music is not very well known in England, but it has a wonderful sense of beauty and at times a serenity of feeling of a most moving kind. Some of the best known of his works are Appalachia and Brig Fair for orchestra, Seadrift and Song of the High Hills for chorus and orchestra, and his opera, A Village, Romeo and Juliet. All of these have great beauties. Italy. The best known of modern Italian composers is undoubtedly Giacomo Puccini, 1858, whose operas La Bohème and Madame Butterfly have a worldwide fame. They are full of lovely melodies and of music written with great musicianship. Puccini came from a family of famous musicians. He showed his exceptional gifts at an early age and had a short opera performed in Milan before he was 30. La Bohème made him famous, and melodies from that opera sung by the greatest singers of our day show his amazing powers of writing music that seems to us peculiarly Italian. Music so admirably written for the voice, melodies which are beautiful and moving. Italy has produced one modern composer of outstanding power, Ferruccio Benvenuto Busoni. In an age of many excellent pianists, Busoni has had a place apart. Not only had he extraordinary command over this instrument, and magical and infinitely varied qualities of tone, but he possessed a unique power of recreating the music he played. In his hands, a Mozart concerto, a Beethoven sonata, or a work of Bach's expressed beauties and depth of feeling unimagined by his hearers and by other performers. His vivid intelligence and the force of his personality were given with complete generosity in the interpretation of any work. In later years, it was not only as a pianist, but as a composer that he was well known. His operas are popular in Germany, and the last is specially interesting, for it expresses the new use of sound and new beauties for which he had so long worked. His music gives the impression of a new outlook in sound, and the few articles he wrote on the future of music suggest many possibilities of new combinations in sound and new uses of sound. Busoni foresaw the possibilities of music when it is set free from a sense of definite key, the new sounds possible from the combination of different existing scales, the possibilities of new tunings of the scale, the fresh counterpoint still to be written with these new sounds, and all these as yet undeveloped possibilities being used to express and convey those inward feelings which can only be expressed by music, for music expresses without limitations of sight or idea. Opera, which has so long been regarded as either the reign of the voice or the supremacy of the story, and in its greatest manifestations as the interplay of characters, was in Busoni's vision the only really complete way of conveying human personality. The outward story, so moving to the eye, roused dramatic feelings, but the picture was only completed by music which conveyed the inner feelings of the situations, and therefore made a complete whole. The music was no longer in any sense an accompaniment of words or story, or an enhancement of them, but an independent art using limitless resources to convey in beautiful form other emotions, other feelings not capable of being conveyed by the words of a drama, but which, when present, enrich the drama with the vision possible only to an artist, and that artist a musician. It seemed as if he saw the possibility of writing music that should not be tied to themes or keys. The use of themes is, as it were, but a form of repetition, and the use of keys but a method of giving the mind a sense of unity, both limitations necessitated by the limitation of listeners' powers. Now, if listeners are sufficiently open to the power of sound, it should be possible for them to follow music without aids of repetition and unity. Music that changes constantly and has one beautiful rhythm after another, one beautiful passage of melody after another, and one lovely passage of massed sound following another. In all these ways the music should grow by itself, each rhythm, melody, and body of sound opening a vision to the mind, and instead of following that vision or repeating the sounds, the music moves to fresh visions and fresh stirring of emotion. Such music could only be written by composers with visions to express, and such sound would convey the true spirit of music, its poetic power to show the inexhaustible, limitless beauties of emotion and feeling. Such music seems to be the music to Busoni's last opera, Faust. It has been described as a new and beautiful use of sound, with constantly changing vistas and vision. Busoni foresaw infinite possibilities of lightness and gaiety in sound, should the right genius arise to express it. Much depth of feeling has been expressed in modern music, but little of that gaiety of spirit and lightness of heart that lie beyond that depth and beyond the changing moods and feelings of human existence. As we listen for the first time to a great work by one of the old masters, certain beauties and interests are perceived by us. It may be only just at a few isolated moments during the work that our interest is arrested and a definite mood roused in us. The rest flows past us without any special effect. It is the kind of sound we are accustomed to and therefore not unpleasing. It is the same when we listen to new works of the present day, only in these there is the difference that probably much of the sound is not what we are accustomed to, and we therefore have a less calm impression of its flow at first. But still, as we listen now and then, some change of sound, some unexpected entry of a note, makes a vivid impression of beauty. New music that gives these moments, and at repeated hearings continues to give such beauties and increase them, such music is opening fresh storehouses of beauty and shows its power to rouse those stimulating, moving feelings which wake in response to beautiful sound. End of section 26 of Music by Ursula Creighton. Read by Martha Weller, Champaign, Illinois, March 30th, 2024.